Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, je voudrais vous souhaiter le bienvenue à cette cérémonie qui marque le lancement du rapport de la Commission.
Welcome you to the launching of this report of the West Africa Commission on Drugs. This will be the program. We will start with a short video on the work of the Commission. Then Chairman Olusegun Obasanjo, Chairman of the Commission, will give you the main conclusions and recommendations of the report. Then Mr. Fernando Carrera, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala, will tell us about the experience of his country and that of Central America, a region that is plagued by illicit trafficking of drugs. And then Mr. Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations and Chairman of the Kofi Annan Foundation, will give us an overview of the situation of drug in Africa in a globalized world. Then we'll invite you for
Novembre 2009, nord du Mali, un Boeing 727 en provenance du Venezuela se pose dans une région désertique du Sahel. L'avion s'écrase et prend feu après une tentative ratée de redécollage. L'appareil était chargé de près de 6 tonnes de cocaïne. La valeur estimée de la cocaïne transitant en Afrique de l'Ouest est de 1,5 milliard de dollars, bien plus que le budget annuel de plusieurs pays de la région.
Drug in West Africa in particular, but in Africa in general, has become a problem.
Aujourd'hui, le trafic de drogue met en péril tous les progrès dans la région. L'argent sape les institutions, impacte les tentatives d'élections libres et est une menace pour les fragiles démocraties et les récentes avancées sociales. Le manque cruel de centres de traitement pour les consommateurs aggrave la propagation des épidémies. Le taux d'utilisateurs par injection infectés par le VIH est massivement plus élevé dans les pays qui les considèrent comme des criminels plutôt que comme des patients. L'attitude des gouvernements qui criminalisent l'usage de drogue plutôt que de le prévenir ou de favoriser l'accès aux soins a surpeuplé les prisons et a aggravé les problèmes sociaux et de santé publique. Dans le même temps, les puissants, profitant des milliards de dollars générés par le trafic, sont souvent intouchables et ne rendent jamais compte de leurs agissements devant la justice. Une approche plus équilibrée permettrait de poursuivre plus efficacement en justice les barons de la drogue et de mieux accompagner les utilisateurs avec des soins appropriés. Considérer l'usage de la drogue comme un problème de santé publique qui nécessite la mise en place de structures de traitement adaptées permettra à l'Afrique de l'Ouest de proposer aux consommateurs de drogue un chemin vers la réhabilitation. Poursuivre les trafiquants internationaux et donner aux victimes de la drogue l'attention médicale nécessaire demande une véritable volonté politique ainsi que des réformes en profondeur des lois et des pratiques.
The solution to these things cannot be handled alone. You need a collaborative effort.
La communauté internationale doit partager le fardeau créé par le trafic de drogue en Afrique de l'Ouest. Cette région n'est ni le principal producteur, ni le plus grand consommateur des drogues qui transitent vers l'Europe ou l'Amérique du Nord. La commission ouest-africaine de drogue, initiée par Kofi Annan et présidée par l'ancien président du Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, est une entité indépendante composée d'Africains de l'Ouest venant du monde politique, de la société civile, du secteur de la santé, de la sécurité et du monde judiciaire. Le rapport est l'aboutissement de 18 mois de recherche et de consultation.
I hope that the report who really generate serious discussion and debate on this important topic. Drugs may have killed many people, but I maintain that wrong governmental policies have killed many more, and we need to rethink.
Merci beaucoup. J'invite
Thank you. Obasanjo to take the floor and brief us on the report. Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am truly delighted to welcome you here today for the official launch of the report of the West Africa Commission on Drugs. Kofi Annan honored me with the task of leading this commission. And when, about 2 years ago, he asked me to take on the responsibility, I said to myself, why won't this man leave me alone? Although I knew that it would not be an easy task, I could not refuse his invitation because the growing impact of drug trade is an issue of enormous significance for our region. Let me express my warm appreciation to my fellow commissioners. Most of them are here to the front on my left. And they are the ones who shouldered the responsibility with me and have been so resolute and committed to this project. Once again, colleagues, I thank you for your commitment. We have all worked together in a very harmonious and productive fashion. Many people and institutions have contributed to the work of the Commission. Governments of the region, non-governmental and civil society actors, regional, multilateral and bilateral agencies have all shared their experience, data, views, and opinions. We are very grateful to for their support and willingness to engage with the Commission. I am especially grateful to our expert group who have accompanied and advised us from the outset of the process and up to the end. A number of organizations have contributed to our work, and in particular, let me mention the ECOWAS, the African Union, the UN Special Representative for West Africa, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, the European Union, the United States Agency for International Development, the Global Commission on Drug Policy, and the International Drug Policy Consortium. Finally, we felt it essential to listen to the stories of some of those whose lives are being defined by drugs, drug users, and drug traders. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this is a landmark report that looks at the many dimensions of the impact of illegal drugs on West Africa. West Africa is particularly vulnerable to transnational criminal activity. Borders are porous, coastlines are under-patrolled, and institutions are vulnerable to corruption. International drug cartels are using our countries as transshipment points between the production centers in Latin America and Asia and consumer markets in Europe and the United States. As the experience from Central America shows, transit countries are not only corridors for drugs, illegal drugs, and the money that they generate invade and destabilize societies. These developments threaten to reverse recent economic and social gains in our region. So far, West Africa has escaped the bloody carnage which scars Central America on a daily basis. But with the stakes so high, there's no room for complacency on our part. Just 1 ton of cocaine that reaches Europe via West Africa is worth more than the security budget of many of our countries. After looking at the evidence and consulting experts from the region and around the world, and visiting some of the most affected countries and communities in West Africa, we have reached a number of findings and conclusions. Let me mention some of the most important of these findings and conclusions. We have found that interdiction, though improving, is still hampered by capacity and resource constraints, and sometimes interference by the well-connected. In some countries in the region, people in positions of power, the security services, and extremist groups have competed for access to the spoils of drug trafficking. This has led, in some cases, to increased political instability and corruption. However, we found that the links between traffickers and terrorist networks are more often opportunistic than ideological. Militarizing the response to drug trafficking will therefore only make matters worse. We believe that West Africa's electoral processes are worryingly vulnerable to corruption by drug money. We have seen this in the process of our work. We have to protect our national institutions and democratic process from infection by drug money. We have also found that it is still mostly users, small, petty dealers, and drug couriers who are arrested and imprisoned, not the big criminal drug barons. We abhor the traffickers and their accomplices who must face the full force of the law. But the law should not be applied disproportionately to the poor, the uneducated, and the vulnerable, while the powerful and well-connected slip through the enforcement net. The small fry is caught, while the big fish continue to swim free. And I know this from experience. When I was a guest of the Nigerian prison system for speaking out too loudly for democracy, my fellow inmates whose offense had to do with drugs were small fries. However, their stay in prison did not improve them. Rather, they often became hardened criminals, going out of the prison worse than they came in. National and international action against the traffickers must be stepped up, especially against those running the networks rather than their foot soldiers on the ground. We need to target those who profit most, whoever they are. Highly skilled and vetted units must be created. Safeguards must be put in place to insulate them against infiltration by organized crime. In parallel, cooperation and coordination among anti-trafficking units and their counterparts in anti-corruption and anti-money laundering agencies within the region and globally has to be stepped up. During the course of our work, we have realized that it is not only the trade in drugs which is causing major problems for countries in the region, but also drug consumption. Drugs have become increasingly available across the region, and drug dependency has increased, especially among our young people. Injecting drug use, in particular, carries the strong risk that HIV and other diseases might spread in the absence of effective treatment and harm reduction services. I am pleased to say that in Senegal, from our work, is spearheading, or seem to be spearheading, some harm reduction responses in this regard, and we commend Senegal for this. Unfortunately, our region is simply not ready or adequately equipped to deal with the spread of drug use and dependency. The response all too often is to stigmatize and penalize drug users. However, pushing them to the fringes of society or locking them up in ever-increasing numbers will not solve the problem. On the contrary, it worsens health problems and puts enormous pressures on the already overstretched criminal justice systems of West Africa. We have concluded that drug use must be regarded not as a criminal justice issue, but primarily as a public health problem. I will emphasize that because there seem to be some misunderstanding from what I've heard in the press over the last 24 hours. We are talking of drug use. Those unfortunate, and I've described them earlier in this presentation, uneducated, poor background, unemployed, poverty-stricken, dropouts, poor family background, who are being made to suffer untold hardship, should not be treated just as issue of criminal justice, but primarily as a public health problem. But those parents who, because of their connection and the money they make, can buy out anybody in government, be it political leader, government officials, security service men and women, and the judiciary, and indeed the banking system must be made to face the rigor of the law. Drug users need help, not more punishment. They are already being punished by the society, which led them to the position they find themselves. We have to put much greater effort and resources into drug treatment and harm reduction facilities and programs. Again, I have personal experience with this. When a kid cousin of mine could not stop using drugs by himself, I looked for help for him. All I found was a private clinic which was not up to good medical standards. That's all that I could use. Unfortunately, in the end, the young man died. The Commission accepts that there are many urgent demands on hard-pressed health budgets. Nevertheless, we strongly recommend the adoption of a drug treatment policy with minimum standards across the West African region. When we conclude that drug use should not be a matter of criminal justice, this means, of course, that we are calling for national drug laws in the region to be reformed. Drug laws need to be based on minimum standards and pursue decriminalization of drug use and low-level, non-violent drug offenses. The protection of the security, health, human rights, and well-being of all people needs to be the central goal. We came to this conclusion because we found that what has been done in the past, the measures that have been taken and the policies that have been followed have not achieved commensurate results. And we believe that we have to think and act out of the box. Countries with a complex issue like drug policy, there's no single simple answer or one-size-fits-all solution. Countries must have the space to define and develop progressive, open-minded policies, best tailored to their own realities and needs. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today our Commission, you have a copy of the report. Today, our Commission presents West Africans with a stark choice. We can continue business as usual and see our institutions undermined by drug money and corruption, see increased violence on our streets, see our young people exposed to disease and epidemics, and see decades of development efforts compromised. In other words, watch our present and future being destroyed before our own eyes. Or we can take a new approach. West African leaders must act courageously to protect their societies by reforming drug laws, strengthening their political and judicial institutions, and engaging with civil society. They must have the vision and be prepared to adopt and adapt success stories from across the globe. We have already seen in other parts of the world the devastation, the trade in drugs can cause. It would be a tragedy if drugs were again to plunge West Africa into conflict and destroy the progress and hard-won democratic gains of recent years. We shall need the support of wider world. We may not be able to keep West Africa entirely drug-free, but we can do a great deal to prevent drugs from overwhelming our society and jeopardizing the future of our young people. The Commission commends its report to you and to our people beyond this gathering, with the earnest hope that we will all take heed of the findings of this report and act on its recommendations positively without delay. This is the report. Thank you for listening.
Le président a fait allusion aux problèmes dans d'autres régions. Simplement.
Probably not with region, not only in West Africa. Therefore, I have the pleasure and honor to invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala, Fernando Carrera, to kindly make a presentation on the situation in Central America, particularly in his country. Thank you.
Excellency, Mr. Kofi Sanjo, Peace Nobel Prize of Africa, really. President Peace, honorable commissioners, members of the diplomatic corps, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start to express my gratitude for this invitation. And on behalf of my president, President Otto Perez, who sends his personal regards to this event and congratulates West African leaders for this courageous and visionary report. President Otto Perez made a statement 2 years ago in February 2012. He had been in office just 1 month at that time. And he said that 20 years before, in 1992, he was the head of intelligence of the Guatemalan army. And as head of the intelligence of the Guatemalan army, he was in charge of coordinating drug efforts in the country. He said that at that time, he was able to capture the most sought Mexican drug leader at that time, Chapo Guzman, the head of the Sinaloa cartel. And he was very happy to do that. He could trust that the strategy of fighting drugs through a war on drugs was the right answer. But 20 years later, 2012, when he became the president of Guatemala, Mr. Chapo Guzman was free, was quoted as one of the richest men on earth, according to the Fortune magazine. He was almost considered a person to follow example in the world terms. And he said, what happened to this world? Because violence is mounting. State players are weakening, and demand for drugs is as strong as usual. So everything was exactly the same, but the drug laws were stronger than ever. He said that February 2012, doing the same is not the solution. We cannot continue doing the same. I have already done this. We have failed. Saying that from a person who was a person who played a leadership role in this process was very courageous on his part. Saying it as a sitting president was even more courageous. Because we had too many leaders who have pronounced words about the world wars in many dimensions. But sitting presidents were almost forbidden to say things like that. Okay. So he said, as a sitting president, I'm committed to find a new way of fighting drugs. We cannot continue doing the same. The fact is that prohibition has failed. Regulation is the new word. We need to work on interdiction, but in a different way. Interdiction, as usual, is not enough, is not doing enough. We need to work on public health. We need to work on better social services. We need to work on economic opportunities for the poor. And we need to focus on legal enforcement against the major leaders of the drug cartels and not on the minor combatants of this war on drugs. Those foot soldiers who are just young people, as President Basanjo was quoting, they were put in prison in spite of their crimes being minor crimes and sometimes just for the reason of consuming drugs. After President Otto Perez's declaration, we have a meeting of the Americas. We call it the America Summit in April 2012 in Cartagena, Indias. And there in that meeting, President Santos from Colombia said what President Otto Perez has just said is what many people in Latin America think. And for the first time in Latin American history and in the Americas history, we had an open dialogue on drug policy at the presidential level at that time. President Obama was present there, and he said, we have tried many things, you will end up doing exactly what we're doing. But he was open enough and intelligent enough to recognize that there was maybe some truth in what we were saying. And he was courageous enough to recognize there was a need to assess policies. As I was saying before, I had an interview before this meeting, and I was saying that I'm an economist by training, and I'm used to evaluate fiscal policies every year and monetary policies on a monthly basis, sometimes on a weekly basis. Okay? But somehow, drug policy had not been evaluated in 40 years. Okay? And the question is, why drug policy is so special that cannot be assessed at least every 5 years, at least every 10 years? Why we have to take 40 years to assess drug policy? And in that meeting, President Obama recognized that there was a need to assess drug policy 40 years after the prohibition element was introduced into drug policy at the global level. And we ran a study at the Organization of American States, which is our African Union. And in the OAS, we concluded 1 year later that there was room for improvement and there was room for change. And we had a meeting last year and another meeting that is going to take place September this year that will redefine drug policies at the Americas level for the period 2016 through 2020 in the next 5 years. And the ideas are very clear so far. One is that no more one size fits all. We need more sovereign policies, more domestic and regional responsibilities, and an enhanced international cooperation. The drug report presented today talks about all these issues, and I think they're doing the right thing by pointing out the relevance of that. On the other hand, drug policy is an intercontinental issue. And this is very important to stress because we need policies, new policies in consumer countries, in producing countries, in trafficking countries, because as the report says today, everything is mixed today. We are not just trafficking countries anymore, and producing countries are not just producing countries, and consuming countries are also producing drugs. And there is a need for a dialogue among different continents. But let me stress today the need for a dialogue between the Americas, Africa, and Europe, definitely. The Americas will strive to reform its drugs policies through the OAS. We have there the largest consumer market of drugs in the world. We have the largest producers and the most affected trafficking countries. That gives us a comprehensive approach where all interested parties get involved. It is important to have a table where all interested parties are seated. Largest consumer markets, trafficking and producing countries. Let me close these remarks by saying once again, thank you for this invitation. This launching of the West Africa Commission report and on behalf of President Otto Perez, it has been an honor and pleasure to attend such a landmark event in this beautiful city of Dakar and be back in West Africa, where I used to live for some years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madame Carrera. Je n'ai pas maintenant d'inviter
The honor to give the floor to Mr. Kofi Annan, and he's following the work of the Commission. Mr. Annan. Je vous remercie, Alan.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me first of all to express my deep gratitude to the Chairman, President Obasanjo, and to the commissioners for their dedication and commitment. They have fully met the expectations we placed on them and produced an excellent report which will have, I hope, an important impact. Let me also pause a moment and thank Foreign Minister Carrera of Guatemala for coming here to share his country's experience with us and to warn us of where we are headed if we don't begin to take action. My appreciation also goes as well to the staff of the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Training Center and my own foundation, who have provided great support for this work. I also would like to recognize with gratitude the generous funding and encouragement received from the European Union's Instrument for Stability, the Open Society Foundations, and the government of Côte d'Ivoire. Many thanks also go to other partners mentioned by President Obasanjo, who have helped shape the vision of this commission. I am especially pleased that we are launching this report here in Senegal, which is emerging as a pioneer in the provision of harm reduction services. We are looking forward to meeting the President of the Republic later this afternoon to give him a copy of the Commission's report. We have heard from Mr. Carrera about the devastation that drug trade has caused in other parts of the world. Each year, hundreds of thousands of people around the world die from preventable drug-related disease and violence. Millions of users are arrested and thrown in jail. Globally, communities are blighted by drug-related crime. Back in 2011, the Global Commission on Drug Policy, of which I am a member, already called on governments to adopt more humane and effective ways of controlling and regulating drugs. We recommended then that criminalization of drug use should be replaced by a public health approach. I am pleased, therefore, that the West African Commission has been inspired by the groundbreaking work of the Global Commission, but has been guided by the realities of West Africa. As President Obasanjo said earlier, West Africa is neither a major producer or consumer of illegal drugs, but it suffers the consequences of both. Countries face three interrelated dangers from illegal drug trafficking. First, there is the threat from drug-funded corruption, which can corrode fledgling state institutions and undermine governance and the rule of law. Second, there is the risk that drug traffickers may link up with criminal elements, or worse, extremist groups that may be trying to infiltrate our region. And finally, there is a harmful impact on health and social cohesion of local communities caused by growing drug consumption by the people within the region. The United Nations, ECOWAS, and the African Union have already sounded the alarm about growing scale of the threat and the dangers to governance, security, and democracy. Governments in the region are taking action to stem and disrupt the flow of drugs, and with the support of external partners such as the EU and the United States. But there remains an urgent need to accelerate and ensure a coherent response at the national, regional, and international level. And I think the previous speakers before me have underlined this need. As you have heard, the West African Commission concludes that current drug policies are not working. We must now have the courage to change policies that no longer fit reality. I hope that this report will provoke urgent and frank debate among political leaders and civil society in West Africa about the best way forward. We can no longer continue to sweep the issue under the carpet. We can no longer maintain it is not our problem. It is our problem. We must own the problem and own the solutions. We call on political leaders in West Africa to act together to change laws and policies that have not worked. Civil society must be fully engaged as partner in this effort. Only in this way can we protect our people as well as our political and judicial institutions from the harm that illicit drugs can inflict. Tackling the impact of drugs through informed, humane, and coordinated policy will require strong and well-coordinated effort. This must be led by West African states with the strong backing of the international community. Governments of countries that are major producers and major consumers of illegal drugs need to deal effectively and humanely with these problems. They can also assist by helping to fund prevention, treatment, and harm reduction in West Africa. Many European states serve as a model for the health-oriented approach to drug policy. In several countries, evidence-based prevention, harm reduction, and treatment are practiced. They should help spread these successes and these practices to other regions. At the moment, however, most external aid, external assistance goes into interdiction and not into treatment. We need to take action now before the grip of the criminal networks linked to the trafficking of illicit drugs tightens into a stranglehold on West African political and economic development. Reforming drug laws, offering chronic users proper treatment and not imprisonment, and stopping traffickers from making further inroads in Africa. These are the vital steps we must take. These are the challenges. They will take us a long way towards reducing the damaging impact of illegal drugs on our communities, families, and individuals. They will help us to ensure that our young people can grow up healthy and secure. Today, we know what works and what does not. It is time for a smarter approach to drug policy, which I fervently hope the report of the West African Commission will inspire. Thank you very much.
Mr. Anand. Before we conclude, I would just like to ask the members of the Commission here present, in addition to President Obasanjo, to perhaps stand and be recognized, and we will have a group photo with the President and with Mr. Anand and Prime Minister Carrera here in the podium. So can I ask President Pires of Cape Verde, please stand, and je vous prie, Monsieur le Président, de vous se mettre ici.
Kindly come to the high table so that we can see President Pires. And then the former Prime Minister from Togo, Eden Kodjo. Madam
The panel of wives of the African Union, Madame Christine Kafondo de Burkina Faso, fondateur d'un groupe activiste.
Founder of a group of activists by Sida, Dr. Idrissa Ba from Senegal, and we've talked about his work earlier. Alpha Diallo, Dr. Alpha Diallo from Guinea-Conakry, and eventually, but not at least, Abiolo Orumbe from Nigeria. And we have three others, quickly have a group picture, then we will leave for the refreshments.